first thing, as we enter chapter 3, we see King Nebuchadnezzar. He is going to build this golden image, this idol, this altar. When I looked at the dimensions of this thing, it's actually it was going to be 90 foot tall by 9 feet wide. So you're talking about a massive monument, a massive golden image that he was creating in southeast Babylon, which is where our story is going to take place. So when you do something like this, really big, anytime this happens, he's going to do what every king would probably do: call in local officials, call in all the big people, the mayors, the governors, all your city officials, and he wants them to come and recognize this image and take part in its dedication. So then there's this messenger, also called a herald. If you've heard the song, Hark the Herald Angels Sing, the angels were heralds. They were messengers. That was their job, was to go and tell some sort of news to someone at that point. So there is a herald or a messenger that tells the people that are around the golden image, hey, when you hear this music play and when you hear the flutes and the lyres and you hear all these sounds, that is your time to bow down and worship that image created by King Nebuchadnezzar. So probably ultimately also giving some praise and glorification to the king himself, since he created this huge image. So in Daniel chapter 3, verse 6, there's a warning that says, not sure if that one was by the herald, but King Nebuchadnezzar says, whoever does not fall down to worship this image, they will be cast into a fiery furnace. So remember that part, because we're going to come back to this fiery furnace. It's going to play a huge part in our story today as we are in Daniel chapter 3. So when the music sounded, the people did what they were told. They bowed down and they worshiped this 90-foot by 9-foot golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had made. So I'm going to stop here, and I want you to write either in your journal or in the chat box, what would you do? Here you are being told you're in Babylon. The king, who is ruler over all, has created this image, and when this music plays, you are to stop what you're doing and you're to bow down and worship this image. But a believer knows that we worship only one God, one true God, and the Bible tells us we can't serve two masters. It's not possible. So here you are, either choosing to do what the king has instructed you to do, or disobeying and being cast into a fiery furnace. So let's stop for like 2 minutes. I want you to be super honest, and I want you to tell me either in the chat box or in your journal, what would you do when given that choice? To bow down and worship this golden image, or to face that fiery furnace by not bowing down? course, we all have that hope that when faced with the same question or the same command, it wasn't really a question, which we may all be here at one point. I'm going to be super honest, but we may all face this question or this time when we know that somebody is commanding us to do something that goes against what God would say. So hopefully, if I'm standing there, I would hope to choose Christ. Unfortunately, I think we let fear sometimes get in the way, or our mind get into the way of our beliefs and what our heart is telling us to do. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But there were three guys who were pretty fearless when it came to bowing down to this idol. So if you're just now joining us, I'm in Daniel chapter 3. Be sure to put your name in the chat box because this information is based out of my first devotional book, Delivered, and I would love to send you a copy and a drawing that I'll have a little bit later. So today in Daniel chapter 3, we're talking about three of my favorite guys. Their names are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And you may think, I've never heard those names in the Bible. You might know them better as Shadrach, Meschach, and Abed-Neto, their Babylonian names. We're going to come back to those names in a minute because one thing that I've been teaching my ladies in Sunday school is that names have meaning. When we just went through a whole study of Bethlehem, and Bethlehem actually means house of bread. And when you read about Bethlehem in different parts of the Bible, that's what people were seeking. And as we know, Jesus, he is the bread of life. He came out of Bethlehem. So names have meaning. They just don't toss a name out there or go buy a baby book and look inside of it and think, what will I name my baby today? There's a lot of process and a lot of thought that went into these names. So I'm going to go back to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah at the end. So hang on, because I want to tell you what those names mean. So in Daniel chapter 3, I'm looking at verses 8 through 18. There's these guys and these Babylonians, some of these officials, kind of like the Sadducees and the Pharisees. They were always watching and always kind of in other people's business. And sometimes when you're, maybe not sometimes, a lot of times, when you're a follower of Christ, people are watching you very closely. And when you mess up or when they think that you have done something wrong, there are times that they want to make sure that they call you out on that. And that's going to happen here with these Babylonians or Chaldeans, as is also how they are referred to in Daniel chapter 3. They notice that there's these guys that are not bowing down. The music has played. They're not stopping what they're doing and bowing down to this golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had made. They were nice enough to remember to the king what he said. If they don't bow down, that you would start this fiery furnace and that they will die in this furnace made of fire. So there's something I want to tell you before we move on. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego are not just like your blue collar workers. Like they're not just your everyday people is how I want to say that. If you go back to Daniel chapter 2, there was a big event that occurred. King Nebuchadnezzar had this dream, and he had called in all these magicians or all these people, these seers, all these people to try to help him determine what this dream meant. That was another big thing that we see in the Old Testament and New. A lot of visions, or God spoke to people sometimes in dreams in various ways. And the king was really frustrated. He just could not. Nobody could figure out this dream for him. So he made this ordinance, and he said, "Okay, then I'm going to kill all of these people, at the ones that are kind of higher up, like the ones that are part of his kingdom, if nobody can help me figure out this dream." So Daniel gets downwind of this. Daniel is the book that we're in today. I'm in Daniel chapter 3. So this book was named after Daniel, also friend of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. So Daniel's going to get a hold of this information and talk to King Nebuchadnezzar. He tells him all about his dream. And I love this part. He goes back to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, and he asks them to pray that God would give Daniel the vision. Just tell him what this dream is about so that they don't ultimately lose their lives. Because Daniel was already part of this kingdom. There were probably many others, many of his friends who were part of this kingdom as well. So after praying, God answered that prayer and he gave Daniel this vision that told him all about this dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had. So as soon as he found out that the vision, and as soon as he uncovered the meaning of the dream, he stopped and he praised God. I love that. It reminds me so much of David, how you just don't think about it. It doesn't have to be a big scene or be in church, but he stopped right then and he praised God for answering his prayer in the way that he, Shadrach, Meschach, and Abed-Neto, had asked. So while he's talking to King Nebuchadnezzar, he made it known that God was the one who gave him the vision. It was not Daniel that came up with this clarification of the dream. It was all back to God. He also took the time to remind King Nebuchadnezzar that everything he had, all the lands he possessed, all the kingdom that was given to him was given to him by God. I love that boldness of speaking to a king and reminding him, none of this is yours. These are not your kingdoms. This is not your land. Nothing belongs to us. Everything belongs to Christ. And I just love that Daniel took the time to remind this king of nothing that he had built up on his own. It was all handed to him and given to him by the great God that we serve. So back to the dream. So Daniel tells King Nebuchadnezzar the interpretation. He's very pleased with it, and he decides to make Daniel the ruler over the entire province of Babylon. So now he's a big higher up. He's going to be chief administrator over all these other wise men of Babylon. But he asked in Daniel 2, verse 49, he wants Shadrach, Meschach, and Abed-Neto to also oversee the affairs of the province. So that's where they're at. They are working as part of the kingdom. So it's one thing, I believe, as when we stand up for our faith or our beliefs, but it's another thing when we see our leaders doing that. I think that really stands out to me and really makes a difference in my life. When you see somebody who is your boss or somebody who is a city council member or someone who is a governor and they're speaking on behalf of their faith and their belief in Christ, that just means so much more to me. And that's why the Bible tells us in the New Testament to be praying over these leaders, that they are following God and that they are living out that faith. So back to our story. The king orders, he wants to see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Neto immediately because they are disobeying his ordinance. He wanted them to fall down and bow down before this golden image, and they are refusing to do that. So he asked if this is true. Are y'all really choosing not to bow down in front of the image that I created, that I made? This is my ordinance. This is my decree. This is what you're supposed to be doing. Of course, they said, I'm not going to say what they said to that question just yet. He goes through the instructions again. All this is kind of rhetorical, like, remember when the instruments play, that's when you fall down and you bow down and you worship. If you don't worship, you're going to be cast into this fiery furnace. So here's the question, Daniel chapter 3:15. Who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? Remember, Daniel just spoke about this God in Daniel chapter 2. And here is King Nebuchadnezzar still not believing, still with so much doubt and so much unbelief, that he's having to ask, who's going to save you in this moment? I am about to cast you literally into a flame of fire, into a pit of fire. And who is going to save you? Who's the God that's going to save you from this? And I love their response. The way my Bible says it, it says, "O Nebuchadnezzar," not king. This is the New King James Version. "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the golden image which you have set up." He is able to deliver. That's what I should have named this entire study instead of what I've entitled this. God is able to deliver us. And they're not finished yet. There's going to be more that they're going to say to the king, as we'll see in a little bit later, or more that that he's going to see come from this. So, what does this mean? Before I tell you my interpretation, what does it mean when they say God that God will deliver us? Here they're facing a fiery furnace. If you're just now joining us, they Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Neto have decided that they're not going to bow down to this 90-foot golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar made. And as he's telling them that they're about to be placed in this furnace, they are telling the king in Daniel chapter 3, verses 16 through 18, that God will deliver us from your hand. So what does that mean? What do you think? Put that either in the chat or in your journal. So I'm in Daniel chapter 3, 19 through 25 is where I'm headed next. Here's my interpretation of that verse. Beautiful verse, Daniel chapter 3, verses 16 through 18. Our God is able to deliver us. That is just shines the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Neto. To me, what they're saying is, even if we're placed in the furnace, we're going to have heaven. So to die is gain. It is not a punishment for us to face this flame or to face this fire. So many people, and this is King Nebuchadnezzar as well, they just see the earthly part of this or the worldly part of this. Well, you're about to lose your life because you chose not to worship this image that I have created. But that's not how they see this. Paul often tells us to die is gain. It's only a great opportunity for us to when we face death as believers. That is our eternal life with Jesus. That is where we get to spend eternity with Him, praising Him in heaven. It is not a punishment to be placed inside of this fiery furnace. Now, do they believe that God is able to save them from this fire? Sure. That could be another meaning as well, but they're not playing the part of God. I think so often we want to do that. We want to control the situation. We want to act like God and say, well, this should happen or that should happen. And that is, y'all, that is not our responsibility. We are not God. He sees the bigger picture, and to Him, there's always a bigger story out there that we don't even know sometimes until that fire is over. And we may never know. I don't know if those things will be revealed to us in heaven or not. but we may not always know why God had us go through that storm, or had us face that trial, or face that pit, or face that fire. But He knows, and He doesn't have to explain anything to us. That is just the great God that we serve. So in Daniel chapter 3, 19 through 25, now the king is so furious and he's so mad. And I just thought about this while I was waiting on you guys to journal, that this probably looks really bad. I just told you in Daniel chapter 2 that these guys are now part of his kingdom. Daniel is part of his kingdom, and his own men aren't obeying him. That's probably not okay in the mind of a king and a leader, especially somebody who's full of pride and they think that it's all about them. So he is so furious and he's so mad at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that he tells his men to go ahead and make that furnace 7 times hotter than it normally is. Well, if you read the Bible, you know that 7 is an important number. It usually means perfection or completeness. And we're about to see how God is going to just reveal this entire story, and he's going to bring all of this to beauty and to glory, and how it's going to build up his kingdom. So this story is going to be perfect, and I love that number is used with the furnace. It's not just a random number. God had a purpose in all of this, and the king, I believe, was commanded or thought to put that number out there, because all of this is going to go back to God and what he is trying to do in the end. So that flame was so hot that it killed several of the men who were just trying to carry Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego up to the furnace. Also, inside the furnace, as they're going up there, they were also bound. So they were tied up in some way. They weren't just, once they got closer, or maybe even before, maybe these guys had to carry them in some way up there to the furnace, but they have some kind of ropes or something that have bound them at this time. So the king begins to look inside of this furnace, and he stops. He notices, wait a minute. Didn't we put in 3 men? It looks like there are 4 men walking around, and I know that we bound them before they entered the fire. So who is this 4th man? You can write that in the chat box or put that in your journal. Sunday school answer. It's probably no surprise to you that the 4th man in the fire is Jesus. To me, the big picture out of this, and we're going to get to application at the very end, is Jesus didn't take them out of the fire. He did not remove the fire from them. He didn't take them out of this trial. He didn't remove the storm or take away the storm. Could he have? Yeah. He did this with his disciples. He was in the midst, in a storm, a literal storm with them. And he didn't stop the storm until they became so afraid. They looked to Jesus, and he said, peace, be still, to the winds and to the waves. So Jesus didn't take away the fire. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in Daniel chapter 3 are in the fire. There they are walking around, but Jesus joined them and was walking in the midst of them, inside of that flame and inside of that fire. What a beautiful picture of Christ. He never leaves us. He never forsakes us when we're his child. Sometimes he may seem quiet. It may feel like there's kind of a distance between us and him, but y'all, he's right there. He is right here. He is in my midst right now. He's the one that put these words on my heart. His words are coming out of my mouth and being spoken to you. So he is in our midst, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Don't ever forget that he is right there with you. He hasn't left you, my friend. He is right there, right amongst you in your situation. He knows all about it. So Daniel chapter 3, 26 through 30. Here's Nebuchadnezzar. He's going to actually walk up there kind of to the mouth of this furnace, and he tells the men to come here. Well, he can't get any closer, obviously. He already killed off a couple of his soldiers. So he commands Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and this 4th man to come closer. as the men were standing around. I'm going to read this part in verse 27. He saw men on whose bodies the fire had no power. I love the way that is spoken. The fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not even on them. So Nebuchadnezzar said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel," in my Bible that's capitalized, I believe that means Jesus, "and delivered his servants who trusted in him. They have frustrated the king's word, and they yielded their bodies that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego should be cut into pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this." And then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. They'd already been promoted in chapter 2, and here they received another promotion. But that's not even the gist of the story. Our God is able to deliver, and King Nebuchadnezzar was the one who was able to finally admit that. My prayer is that he spoke to God and that he believed and that his faith was made just and made right, and that we'll see him again in heaven one day. So I shared, or I told you that I would share with you the meanings of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, the Hebrew names of these three guys. And you're going to be just, I think, shocked when you hear the meanings of their name and how it fits with this story. Hananiah means Yahweh is gracious. Yahweh is another word for God. Mishael is a question. Who is what God is? Nobody is the answer to that question. I love that. This Mishael's name means who is what God is. And then Azariah, his name meant Yahweh has helped. God has helped. And we see in this story what a beautiful depiction of how God helped these men, these great believers who, like King Nebuchadnezzar admitted, they sacrificed their bodies. We saw that with Jesus on the cross. He did the same for us as well. And I'll say that here in just a minute. So if you want to journal really quick and write down the meanings of those names, I'll tell you those one more time before we get off of here. Hananiah means Yahweh is gracious. And then I hope you go back and reread and maybe find ways that God was gracious in this story in Daniel chapter 3. Yahweh is gracious. Mishael is a question. Who is what God is? Who is what God is? Mishael. And the last one, Azariah. Yahweh has helped. Can it be any better part of a story? What a great group of men that God chose. And then we get to be on the receiving end of this and read this amazing miracle, this amazing story to give us hope that these same men had even in their times when they were as in the Old Testament. I'm going to say that one more time. Azariah, Yahweh has helped. So what a beautiful story of God's deliverance. I think I shared with you earlier, this is all based on my first devotional book, Delivered, Finding Hope in the Storms of Life. You can find that on my website at whitneysparks.org. I hope you get a chance to check it out. But I want to share with you really quick just some application or some key takeaways. I hope you go back and reread this again and also do a little bit more journaling. So God uses ordinary people. I just mentioned that. He had a purpose and a plan for Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It just wasn't by chance that they were chosen to be the ones put into this fiery furnace, to be the ones in the flame. God had a purpose and did something extraordinary with these ordinary men. My friend, he wants to do the same for you today. But my question is, what are you choosing, or who are you choosing to worship? Are you thinking like King Nebuchadnezzar and thinking of things that are temporal. He made an actual golden image, 90 foot tall, but maybe there's something else taking your time and attention away from God. Maybe it's television. Maybe you're hooked on these shows and it's keeping you from, and there's nothing wrong with television, but if it's keeping you from the Word and if it's keeping you from reading His Word and drawing closer to Him, maybe that's your idol. You might need to check yourself on that and see if that's something that you might need to give up. Maybe it's social media. Maybe at night I'm sitting there on Facebook and you can check your phone and see how long you've been on there. And maybe I spent 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours. And instead, I could have been serving somebody, or I could have been praying for someone, or I could have been checking on somebody who's been sick or who's been ill, or I could have been, again, spending that time in the Word, listening to a Christian podcast, turning on praise and worship music, spending that time worshiping God, and instead I was worshiping social media. Whew, that one kind of hits a little heavy. That has been my downfall. So has television. Over this break for the past week and a half, I've been caught up in all sorts of shows, and my Bible is starting to gather a little bit of dust on it. So please know that I am speaking to myself just like I'm speaking to you. So don't run from Christ. Don't be like Jonah and try to go the opposite direction and go like, 1,400 miles away from where God is calling you. Listen. And if you haven't heard God speak to you or know where God is leading you, then I challenge you to find that quiet time. That's what we're going to do in this challenge. It's on my website, whitneysparks.org. I Choose Joy Challenge. We are going to talk about how to find times to just be quiet and sit with God. How to find joy just in reading His Word. But the big thing that I hear people say is, I don't have the time. And I promise you, the time is there. It's just being taken up with something else. And there's something else taking the place of, there's some other golden image like King Nebuchadnezzar made, taking the place of your time that we could be spending with Christ. So I will help you discover that in the I Choose Joy Challenge as well. The next application piece, I want you to be bold in your faith. If you notice, these men never back down from their belief in Christ. And because of that, King Nebuchadnezzar finally believed that God is Yahweh. God is the God who says that He is. He is faithful and He is just. So there may be times that you're laughed at or called a holy roller, or that you're so religious and maybe made fun of, and maybe that's by family members. I know people that have been excluded from their family because of their beliefs in Jesus Christ. But I want to challenge you to continue on in your faith. Find other believers. If you need to, reach out to me. I will be glad to listen to your story. I've had people call me and just need a listening ear, and I'll be glad to intervene if there's something that I can say or scripture where I could point you in the right direction. But I want to challenge you not to back down on your faith. I said this earlier, we may all be in a place where we're told to either worship this image or to worship something created by our government or created by officials, or face a consequence for not choosing that. There are nations all over the world where there are churches that are people that are in hiding, and they are starting local churches. And if they're ever found out, they will be persecuted. They will face death. So we need to pray for our missionaries. We need to pray for these people that as long as they can stay in secret, and that God just place a protective hedge, places angels over them to protect them as they are seeing so many souls saved and come to Christ. So I said this earlier, we all worship something. You have to choose who or what you're going to worship. So that's the key here with Shadrach, Meschach, and Abed-Neto. There was never a doubt that they chose God above all else. And lastly, as part of this, I have a chapter in my book, Delivered, that talks about salvation. We've all been delivered thanks to Jesus Christ. Thanks to God who sent His Son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross for us so that we can live with Him eternally. The choice is yours to believe. All you have to do is accept this free gift. If you have any questions about any of this, I would be glad to speak to you. There is a place to contact me on my website, whitneysparks.org. I'll choose a name real fast for the book that I'm going to give away. Make sure and join that I Choose Joy Challenge as well. That's also on the front page of my website. I'd love to see you there. And Delivered, my new book, is available now on Amazon. So it is out there and ready for purchase. Najim, you're our winner for today. Congratulations on Delivered. I will get with you and get an address from you and ship that book your way. So thank you so much for jumping on today. Feel free to share this out if you liked this video today. I'm so thankful that God made a way. We did not have a wrestling meet today for me to jump back on here with you all. I will do another chapter based off of Delivered, my latest book, Finding Hope in the Storms of Life, but I need to check our wrestling schedule and I'll get that out as quickly as possible. This one was kind of short notice and I apologize for that. So glad to have the opportunity to speak to you all today. I pray that you go out this week and that you remember Shadrach, Meschach, and Abed-Neto. Be bold in your faith. Tell somebody about Jesus. Stop and pray with someone. Just listen. Listen to people. Man, we are living in a hurting world. And so many people I've seen commented about how 2024 was such a hard year. And that's when God prompted me to, hey, let's do this challenge. I choose joy, because joy can only be found in and through Jesus Christ. So share that with someone this week. If it's hard for you to say those things and say those words to people, then I'll be praying for you to be bold in your faith, and you pray that prayer as well, that Christ keep you bold also. So love you guys. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your Saturday. I know I'll be cleaning up today and hopefully making some homemade biscuits. Reach out if you need anything, whitneysparks.org. I'd love to see you, hear from you. If I can help serve you or your church in any ways, please let me know. Have a great day.